It is Karl at Slick Rooster Studio again. Good morning. Well, it doesn't matter. You can watch this any time of the day, but for me, it's morning time, early on Saturday. Uh, Pollen season, allergy season in Texas, and perpetually just gross. Uh, I have a white car, and every time I go out in the morning, it's getting more of a lime green dust over the top of it. It's real gross. Um, and then when I first take off, I open the sunroof, and all that powder flies in right on top of me. So I may be a little stuffy sounding today, but that's that. I wanted to revisit the Artware watercolor set. I noticed on YouTube, oh God, on Amazon, that they've knocked it down from like 36 bucks to $20. That is a deep cut. Um, that is a great price for this set of watercolors. Um, I'm not sure why they did it. I don't know if they're trying to blow out their old stock so they can filter. I know that they've made some changes and fix some issues like the cerulean blue tube being hard. Uh, so they might just be trying to blow their old stock out and make room for the new stuff. Whatever the reason, $20 for this set is, I mean, this is every bit as good as any student grade watercolor, except for a couple of pigment choices, like Cotman and Van Gogh, which are probably the two best student watercolors, at least here in the U.S. Um, they both use pretty good pigments across the board, as far as light fastness goes. And a lot of the pigments, if they're true in the Art Whale set, are also, you know, good pigments. I need to do a light fast test on these. It's just for my own curiosity, if nothing else. But I'll do a results video of that. But it's going to be another month. We're just now getting the sunshine, hot sunshine back in Texas. Summertime in Texas is a great way to do light fastness tests because the sunshine here is just brutal and the sky is huge. So yeah, it's all day sunshine blaring down. So I wanted to go back and do another art wheel picture and talk a little more about them. Yeah, just a little chat, something that I need to put some content up on YouTube, and I've been really busy on Instagram, so uh, I'm hoping today to put a couple of videos up just to keep my channel moving forward. It's slowly growing. Uh, yeah, subscriptions and likes and all that. I'm learning how that works. The search engine optimization, SEO stuff. Uh, yeah, there's just a lot to learn, but it's slowly growing and it takes time. I know there's a lot of very successful studio channels out there, but they've been around for 10 years, and I'm not really a super patient person, so I'm just like, "Ah, I want it now." Um, but yeah, so that's been that's been a little bit of a challenge for me to accept the fact that it's just going to take time. But every day it's exciting to see my numbers growing a little bit and a little bit, and hopefully I'll do something crazy with the chickens. I can post that, or you know, something silly with the animals, or something here on the farm. I can post something, it goes viral, and then everybody uses that to kind of channel into my studio stuff. So yeah, all right. I'm gonna use. I got this a little stack. I don't know. This is Coventry rag, and they believe it's 290 GSM, which it's about like 140-pound watercolor paper. It's a printmaking paper, um, and I got this little that I tore up into quarter sheets like this. It is really great paper. Printmaking paper is usually kind of soft on the face, and it'll be internally sized. It's so when you're doing block printing or something, whatever ink or paint that you have on your stamp or engraving, when it hits the paper, it sticks and stays in one spot. It doesn't feather or flow like what watercolor paper would do with external sizing. So Coventry Rag is really good printmaking paper. It's made in the U.S. by Legion paper company. I don't know if that's a real name. It's Legion something or another. Really fantastic paper supplier company. I know they just started making their own 140-pound premium watercolor, and it's really good stuff. The Stonehenge uh, Aqua. I've got a bunch of that. They also the Stonehenge. The Stonehenge printmaking. Stonehenge paper is great uh, pastels and things. So it's nice to see that they've branched that out. 100% cotton across the board. Just really well made paper and decently affordable, at least here in the U.S. because it's probably because it's made here in the U.S. But anyhow, this Coventry rag is one of my favorite papers, even for watercolors. It has on one side it's like a hot press, a real smooth surface, and the other side is like it's a pretty rough vellum. I don't know if you can hear that. Um, I might be able to show it to you if I get the light just right. That's probably not going to happen. I got too many weird lights to get some shadows. But it's almost a cold press, this vellum. So I really like it for doing small stuff. I've made a lot of sketchbooks out of this because it does paint well on both sides. I'm not a big hot press fan, at least with watercolors, but it's great for pen and ink and things like that because stuff doesn't feather on it. Like when you this is a just an ink pen and it grabs that ink and just sucks it in, doesn't allow it to spread. Whereas a lot of my papers, especially with thinner inks, it will it will definitely blossom all over the place. This is platinum carbon ink. Um, I don't know if this thing's. Yeah, this is. I got to go through that with some water. This is a dip pen nib that I installed in a fountain pen, and it's really cool. Uh, because it just flows ink forever. But every time I use it, I kind of got to kickstart the ink flow. There we go. This guy is Platinum's carbon ink, and it is pretty wet. I've noticed that it will blossom out on, gosh, almost every kind of regular paper that I use. But for printmaking papers, it does a really good job. So this is the hot press side, but both sides are good for pen and ink, any sort of thin, wet media, uh, as you would expect a paper printmaking paper to be. So anyways, I got a small stack of this stuff that I had torn up into 16ths, and I've got this rack over on the side of my desk here, and I've got a bunch of paper in it that I keep forgetting to use, and so it kind of sits there and gets dusty, and this stuff's got some, I don't know, it's dirt or just studio grossness. I don't know if the ruler slid across there, but uh, these vanish erasers from Accurate. Let me see if Accurate is spelled interestingly. I don't know what's going on with this camera lately. I've not been able to get it to autofocus very well. Um, but anyways, these are great erasers for all kinds of stuff, and uh, you get paper that you've drug across a dirty table or something metal's gone over the top of it or even smudged from your fingers, and this just takes it right off. It's just a super great eraser for cleaning things, and it doesn't. I've noticed on watercolor paper, it doesn't pull the sizing off the top. A lot of erasers will cut through the sizing or remove it, and then you hit it with watercolor afterwards, and it just soaks in. It doesn't. It's kind of wrecks the paper. This is very gentle on the paper. Um, I know this looks like a lot of eraser dust, but it typically doesn't do that. It kind of um, sticks to itself, uh, like a gum like a gum eraser. But for some reason, on I don't know if it's this paper or what, but it's definitely making dust. At any rate, that's a I hate saying at any rate. I'm really trying to break myself of that. It usually means that I've gone off on a tangent and I'm trying to come back gracefully, but yeah, Tangent Studio would have been a great name for my channel. So, all right, I cleaned that off. I'm just gonna do a quick ACEO. There we go. I will use this one since I've already kind of spoiled it with the ink on that side. So I'm gonna trace out a ACEO. As straight as that. ACEO outline that I'll cut out later. This is how I do my ACEOs. Is I don't like to I don't like to paint with you know, you can pre-cut or get pre-cut ACEO watercolor paper or whatever that's exactly that size. Problem is with watercolor paper or any paper really, when you get it real wet, it expands and then it shrinks when it dries. And if you start out with a dimensionally set, you know, 2.5 by 3.5 inch, it goes, oop, now I'm 3 5/8, and then it shrinks back down, and half of it's, you know, 3 9/16, and half is 3 7/16 or something. And it's got warps and things like that. By leaving it on a larger piece of paper, you transfer that spread and stretch out a little bit, and then when it comes back and dries, the paper itself kind of keeps it from shrinking too far. And afterwards, you can always check your dimensions with the frame again, um, to make sure that you're getting an actual 2.5 by 3.5 inch card. So that's one of my little ACO things that I do. Um, just ensures that when you put it into a hard case or a top loader or something, um, you don't notice a bunch of wobble on the sides and that sort of thing. As long as you cut it out straight. That's another thing. Is, you know, when I get older, my eyeballs are. I got to get my readers out to see what I'm doing, and when I'm cutting the lines, or if I use a lot of dark color, the lines go away. So I got to kind of remake them with graphite or something. But overall, I like doing it like this, and I've actually been playing with the idea of um, leaving these. I guess this would be a 30-second sheet, since I took that 16th sheet and folded it in half and cut it. Um, I thought about leaving these and start something new called like ACEO Plus or something, and because I like to use the paper as my palette when I'm mixing, kind of see how it reacts on the paper before I put it on the actual painting. Um, Most times I like to do that. I forget sometimes, and I end up with surprises. Some of them are good and some are bad. Oh, coffee. That's I'm kind of disappointed with myself. I'm almost done with my coffee, and there was some shortbread cookies here that I wanted to try with coffee. I think they would have been great, but yeah, at least the coffee's cold now. That's good. Yeah. All right, another tangent. So, Coventry rag paper, art wheel watercolors. Like I mentioned in my initial review video of these, they shrink a lot. Now, if you see that, oh yeah, look at that. This is a newly poured pan. This is the replacement cerulean blue tube that they sent me, and you can see the shrinkage that these things go through. It's shrunk and split into like 3 pieces in this welt, and they're just completely flopping around and they're loose. And the problem with that, especially for a travel watercolor, is if it's in your backpack or something and it's shaking around, every time it shakes against itself, it makes these little crumbs, these little blue crumbs or whatever color it is, and that gets in your other watercolors, and then you got contamination all over the place. Um, what I've been doing with this palette is, once these watercolors shrink and dry and crack and get brittle like this, they're pretty easy to pop out. And I try to keep them, you know, the little puzzle pieces assembled off to the side. And then here's my, yeah, gotta dig out my, this is the replacement tube that they sent me that's actually, you know, liquid watercolor in the tube. Oh, and I did want to mention today, I don't know if I mentioned it or not. I noticed yesterday that that set of watercolor paints is on sale on Amazon right now for $20. Did I mention that at the beginning? It is morning. At any rate, I did mention it because I remember saying things about it. Sorry, I'm not going to edit this. I'm trying to get videos out there quick. Yeah, so the bloopers are real, folks. So, anyway, what I've been doing with these is pulling them out and then filling a little bit in the well for glue, and trying not to get too crazy with that, because um, I don't want to smoosh it where it's coming out the top. This feels like it's going to get messy. I put a little too much in there. So what I'm doing is just replacing the pieces that I pulled out and using more of the paint as a filler and glue in between in between the pieces. And it's going to shrink again, I'm sure. But you get it. You do this enough times, and it binds to itself, and it fills in, and will eventually fill that well uh, to where it doesn't pop out. Like you've seen, like this is a good example here. Um, Doing that over and over. And this is not just these paints. This is something that happens with lots of watercolors. Any watercolors that don't have a lot of filler, they shrink up when the moisture comes out of them. And if they don't have, like a lot of glycerin or honey or something in it to keep the elasticity, this is what happens. They break and shrink and crack. But like I mentioned in the last video, I've been very impressed with Art Whale watercolors because they re-wet really well, even in this state of brittle hardness. So I'm very happy about that. They re-wet as well or better than most any other professional watercolor paint that I have, even though they feel like they shouldn't. Like Reeves or any of the just horrible, terrible, cheap uh, student grade watercolors. When they dry up and crack like that, you can soak them in water, and half the time they won't re-wet. So whatever they did in the formulation here, they did it well. Um, I got blue paint chips all over my little paper towel here. So yeah, I could go back and do more of these. I don't know that I'm gonna leave this color in this palette, so I'm not doing it with this one. I may peel that out of there, and that's just such a weird color, and I don't. Clearly, it's mislabeled. The pigments on it are not PG7 and PY 154. That unless they've got some kind of black market, flea market pile of pigments that are just so off color that that's how they end up, and they're just trying to use them up. I don't want to accuse them of that, but that this color is not great in any. It's a weird color. So I think I'm gonna let that harden, and I'll pull it out and put something else in there. Uh, I've only got the Viridian green, sorry, not Viridian, the Phthalo green, which is a real strong green, and then there's sap green, which is really nice. So I might do something here, maybe another yellow that I can use when I'm mixing earths and trees and things, so I don't have to contaminate these guys. Uh, Although I mix my greens down here, whatever. That's just palette management. It's part of the fun of watercolor. I'll figure something out. All right, now I get that out of the way. So yeah, back to the idea of I've been thinking about doing like ACEO plus. What would you call it? ACEO plus something like that. It'd be kind of fun to leave. You know, like I could put the information. This is Coventry Rag, Art Whale watercolors. These are the colors I use, and kind of leave this side for my working palette. I've been yeah, I've been toying with that idea. I don't know how much of an interest that would be to collectors, because they can always cut it out themselves and have the card and pitch the rest if they don't want it. Uh, but to me, I find it interesting to see we people's working palettes, if nothing else. Um, okay, so let's paint. What am I going to paint? Um, hmm. Let's do a sailboat. I haven't done a lot of boats. Boats are fun to paint. I built boats for years when I was younger, from 6-foot dinghies all the way up to 80-foot commercial fishing boats. Uh, living in a boat town, port town up in Washington in the Pacific Northwest. Uh, I love working on boats because there's rarely any like corners, like 90-degree corners. Everything is I wouldn't call it organic. It's still got to be geometrically, sound. Uh, but it's interesting to draw. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting to work with the wood, uh, because everything is a curved line. I've got somewhere here in my studio a big set of ship's curve. That's just a bunch of plastic templates that are well, it's like same idea as a French curve. They're just long and drawn out, swept curves that are really hard to freehand at that size. Um, but yeah, they're called ship's curves. They're great for drawing cars or any sort of mechanical thing with curves. Um, you put 2 points together and then you kind of work along you work the curve along the line and kind of find the right curve that uh, you like. A lot of them are hyperbolic curves, um, like a French curve. They start out small and then get big as they go out. Um, oh yeah, painting boats is it can be very forgiving because there are no square corners. Perspective is tough. Like, where's my other, find something. That was something wet. I don't know what that was. So I'm gonna use a pencil on this, or a pen. Uh, say you have a shape, and I'm gonna try to draw this as symmetrically as I can. Would you call it an almond shape or lemon shape or whatever? Now, with a box, in perspective, we know that the box tapers together the farther away it gets from you in perspective. So it's wider here than it is here, this line. Now, this guy, same idea. Let's draw a little bigger box just for kind of help us. And this is something that you would do in pencil as a mechanical draftsman, or probably even with CAD or something, to have a no, not with CAD because you don't need it because it's cheating. So you would find the center point on this box, and I'm just going to wing it and call it here. Uh, find the center point between these two lines and the center point between these two lines. And honestly, this is an impromptu. Oops, that's not right. You find the center point here and the center point here, and then you draw a line between them. Now you know your center point in the middle of the box. You can also do it by going from the diagonals, making an X between the corners. So in order to say we're gonna like with this box, we tilted it this way so it's sitting flat on the ground, and like this is the 2D version of the top of the box. So same thing with this whatever that is, almond shape, eyeball shape. It's like a lemon. Um, in perspective, the widest part, if that's indeed the center, would touch the edges here. I'm hoping that this is, I'm trying to make sure you can see. So that curve there, it's sort of the same idea as an ellipsis. There's the long point and the short point or something. I don't know. This is a terrible this is a terrible perspective uh, demonstration, but you get the idea. Even though it has no corners, really, in perspective, um, it's still tricky. You can paint a boat to the in a way without getting the perspective correctly. We're going to turn this into a boat, or we're going to try. So there's the boat. In perspective, these would be like lap strakes on the side of the boat. If you don't get that right, it ends up looking like a Grandma Moses. And Grandma Moses was cool. She did some amazing stuff. My mom actually was not a perspective genius. She just never developed it. She was more into learning colors, and just her art was beautifully detailed, like super super busy. She was a doodler. I remember when I was a kid, she would talk on the phone for hours and sit there with, like, back when we had the big old phone books. She would just start on page one of the yellow pages and just start doodling really cool doodles, Celtic knots and just crazy doodles, and all of a sudden the whole page would fill up with these big floral, the stuff that she could have made $1 million on selling as adult coloring books now. If she'd have done it on real paper, um, and published it, she'd have been, yeah, very wealthy. Perspective though, she knew she would. Okay, so like her street scene would be like this, and for me as an engineer would drive me nuts. There's no taper anywhere. So this would be a building here and a building here. And she understood shading. She would do this side dark and this side light. The light source would be coming from this direction. Um, but everything would be the same size. No matter, like, far away, you'd get, she would draw a car out here, and it would be the same size as the car here, even though it's 300 feet difference in real life perspective. Very similar. Grandma Moses was the same way. Her pictures of like big farms and fields, everything was the same size, no matter how far away it was. Really cool artwork. But my mom passed away now 5 7 years ago now, um, and I really miss her because we enjoyed sharing art together. And I remember I feel so bad because I would say, Mom, it's not in perspective. You're not doing it right. And criticizing her art because it didn't look realistic to me. But now I look back at her stuff, and it's just beautiful and whimsical and sorry, shouldn't have brought that up. So, anyways, perspective is important. I don't know, is it? To me, it's important to draw a realistic boat in perspective like this. The sail would come out of the middle, so it would come through that little cross I put in the middle, and there's the sail of this little boat that I'm drawing, and we'll color in the inside black or darker, so you get the idea. I'm not getting very far in this art whale review. Sorry, I'm so little. So perspective to me is important. Um, and boats, while they seem like, since there's no corners or anything, it's all curves and um, amazing joinery. It's still difficult to draw them realistically, to sketch them out, and I don't know that it's that important. A lot of instruction that I've had with art is it's more important to infer something, keep the feeling and the vibe and the spirit in there. Um, don't worry about being so technical. You're not drafting something, and if you want to reproduce a photograph, just use the flipping photograph. Um, use your drawing and your art to stay fresh and keep your lines energized. And if one of them's off, don't do what I do all the time. I'll draw a line and go, oh crap, that's not straight, and so I'll go back and try to correct it, and then it ends up being just super uh, overworked and tight feeling, instead of a nice, just a smooth line. Peter Sheeler, a lot of his stuff here on YouTube, watching his line and wash drawings, and his line work is amazing because he he can, like, he doesn't turn his paper. A lot of, like, Scott Robertson, I think that's his name. I have one of his books about drawing, and they don't turn their paper. They've gotten themselves to where they use their whole arm, which is something I struggle with because I get anchored down and I get really tight and I'm just working from the wrist like this. They use their whole arm to sketch and draw, and they can take a piece of paper like this and draw equally wonderful curved lines. Like, I'm pretty good this way, I can draw circles, but when I start unanchoring my arm and coming around that way, things get sideways on me pretty quick. Um, they can draw a great straight line this way, they can draw a great straight line this way, and I mean, this is just making marks on paper and practicing is how they get that good. But ever since I was a kid, I learned I need to make a straight line this way, and if I want to make a straight line this way, I use that same motion with my hand, and I just adjust the paper underneath of it. And I still do this. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's really nothing wrong with the way anybody does anything. But if you learn to do it this way, that's what they say. You can tell a true artist by the way if they can just walk up to a chalkboard and draw a perfect circle on it. That's a truly talented. No, I don't want to say gifted either. I think there's very little talent has doesn't have as much to do with technique as just blood, sweat, and tears. Practice, practice, practice. Draw a million circles. Um, so yeah, back to boats. Again, the tangent. I'm just not going to edit it out, but uh, so back to the boat thing. Drawing a boat in action on the water. There's energy to a boat. We're gonna draw a sailboat, um, and so there's energy to a sailboat. Well, any boat that's in motion, any body that's in motion, there's an energy to the lines, and I really struggle with keeping that energy in my sketches because I want it to look perfect, and so my lines end up getting tight um, instead of being a nice just once and done. Quit messing with it. Learn how to do it better next time instead of fix this one, make it perfect. Um, yeah, I struggle with that. So I've really been trying to draw things and just accept that. Oh, okay, that's not perfect. Let's get it painted and we'll do it again. So, uh, yeah, we're gonna draw a boat. What I'm gonna do is put a. This is gonna be a cheap and easy cheat. First thing I'm gonna do is draw my waterline horizon. Yeah, I guess that's is the waterline the horizon line? I don't remember now. I'm gonna figure that out and tack it on there. This is a watercolor pencil that I wouldn't normally use this color when I'm doing watercolor pencils. I've got the set of 120 or whatever the Color set is. I bought a couple of those sets, and I've got real water. I don't want to say that. I've got expensive watercolor pencils that I use when I'm actually doing it for real. But I bought these two to see how they compare, and they're pretty good. But I don't use weird purples and things. I'm not a floral artist, so most of my stuff is landscaping, and so the bright pinks and other things I use as sketching tools because it kind of washes away when I add the watercolor paint to it. So we're gonna move that up a little bit. And I'm just eyeballing. If it's off a little bit, I can adjust it. So that's gonna be about where the water is. Um, we'll put a. Let's give it something interesting, so it's not just an open ocean kind of a piece. I'll put something in the background. This is a far off mountain. I'll just fade it out, give it some distance perspective. Okay, so now the boat. Yeah, the boat. So going back to this, I'm just going to kind of wing it a little bit. I want the main hole to be under the waterline, so um, that's weird. When I say waterline, I mean the horizon line. Uh, yeah, I'm just going to wing it. That boat's sitting straight up and down in the water mostly. Sailboats, they tend to lean to whatever side they tack. I've always been fascinated by sailboats. I've never gotten into sailing. I mean, any boat that I've ever owned has always been a hole in the water that you put money into to fill. Um, all right, so we're gonna tilt this boat over this way, get some perspective, and the sail's gonna come up, or the mast is gonna come up here. And again, I don't know that much about sailboats, but it feels like, what would you say, like the meat of the sail, whatever side that is kind of, you got the boom on the mast. Say the mast is here, and you got the boom that holds the bottom of the sail. When the boom is over to the side, and the wind's coming from behind the boat, it's going to pull the boat over this way. So I would put the sail out on this side over here. And again, perspective wise, I don't know that much about sailboats. I know that the sails billow a little. Um, so you got your boom swinging out to the side, your billowing sail. Call it rigging up there. Uh, yeah. So I'm gonna quit monkeying with it and just let it be. So there would be waves coming up off of it here. And really, that should be a little more flat. See, now this is where I'm getting into I fiddle things to death and lose the natural energy. But c'est la vie. I like that better. Sue me. So one thing I am going to do is get that horizon line out of that sail, because I want to show you one of the things that I like to use. Wow, that doesn't erase very well at all. I'm not a masking fluid guy. It's a weird extra step that I feel, at least for me, I lose the energy of my piece just by taking too long to put that stuff on there. And then waiting for it to dry and then working over it, and you peel it off, and half the time it peels the paper off. I don't like it. A lot of people use it. I think the edges that it leaves behind are a little harsh, and I know you can blend it afterwards, but it just gets too splotchy for me, and yeah, I don't like it. So what I do use is a wax resist. Now, a lot of people will, they'll use um, like a piece of paraffin candle. Boy, that doesn't come off. This is the problem with using a watercolor pencil that doesn't dissolve well. Here's something I can dab that off there with. Oh yeah, see, being a printmaking paper, I can't erase that too much because it starts to pill up. So yeah. Anyways, back to a wax resist. This is a Karen Dosh. I think that's how you say it. This is a colorless blender. Um, it's just a big stick of wax, I think, is what it is. But it's a hard wax, so you can get a nice fine tip on it and get details. Whereas a piece of handle or something like that, you can only get. I guess if you're working bigger, you can get details with it. But I like this for doing ACEO stuff because it's yeah, I really all right. All that stuff said about the energy of the line, I like the idea of this thing billowing out a little farther past so the boom's back here, but the sail would come out farther and be more over the center of the boat. I don't know. I like that line better. So now I'm going to try to erase this other purple line, which looks like it's probably going to end up being a permanent installation on this sailboat sail, which isn't a big deal. So right, I'm going to dry this real quick. Wow, everything's flying around. All right. And again, I'm working on the vellum side, the rough side that's almost like a cold press. Uh, this paper is so dimensionally stable. Like you can get it wet on the one side and it does expand a little, but when it dries, man, it tightens right back down and there's no wobble at all. It's a really great paper especially for two-sided work, like in a sketchbook or something. So I'm using this Caran d'Ache colorless blender to lay down a wax resist over where the sail's going to be. To preserve the white. Now, I really am probably going to end up kicking myself for doing that because I would like to, put a red stripe or something on the sailboat sail. But this is just a demonstration of one of the tools that I use. I find this very useful for uh, landscape work, like when I'm doing barns or something like that, any sort of a structure that I would like some sharp lines on. Coffee's kicking in. I'm careful not to go over that watercolor pencil line, which isn't a big deal if you do, but it will make it kind of a permanent fixture on your painting. Whereas if you leave it naked when you start doing your washes, it'll wash that watercolor pencil off. Oops, what am I doing? So I just wax resisted outside of the box that I wanted to preserve. Okay, so that stuff does leave dust too, so you want to kind of knock that off of there. Otherwise it ends up being a permanent fixture in your painting. So, all right, what do I got? I don't remember what. Well, that's super dark. All right, so I'm gonna have a real dark background behind this barn. With that wax resist, I don't have to be super careful now. Remember, I don't have it on the roof part because the roof I'm going to change color. But I don't have to be super careful on or around the area where I did the wax resist. So let's say there's a bunch of trees or something back there. Um, and just for fun, we'll put a swatch. See how it beads up? Hopefully you can see that. And we're going to put some yellow ochre. Now, you see how that color's on there, but you can pull it away and it lifts, it's just color sitting on top of wax, where lifting normally, um, you're always going to leave a little bit of color behind. Now we're gonna say the sunshine's coming this direction, so I'm not going to do a lot of color. I want to leave some white on the roof, and that you see it's blooming into that thing. I normally would dry that green part, but this is just a quick example. So letting some of the yellow ochre live on top of that is nice because the sun would reflect some color and push it up onto the side of a white building as yellow light. I don't remember what they call it. There's cast shadows and there's a bunch of different types of shadows and things, and that's all in everybody else's tutorials. Mine doesn't have that. So the cool thing about this Caran d'Ache is you can just use this as a shadow color. You can work it and it washes off, if that makes sense. If you work it enough, it will cut through and you get down onto the paper. Cast shadow there. There's the shadowy side of the building. Now you can let that dry on top of there. You can still, dab it off a little. But if you let that dry, it's permanent. Now I varnish my work. Uh, so many things. So I use a spray fixative over the top of my watercolors. I do it outside. I won't do it in here because it just stinks to high heaven. And it's not healthy, but stink. Uh, so I would spray that watercolor with a fixative lightly, not crazy enough to kind of stick it down, and let that dry, and then I varnish over the top of that with like an acrylic varnish. This is a polyurethane, a water-based polyurethane varnish. I really like this stuff from Joe Sonia, which is a chroma company. Um, really nice matte finish. It's a little on the thick side, viscous, whereas the golden stuff that I have, this is a gloss. I need to get some of this stuff in the matte too. This is a gloss poly. The reason I got the gloss is it doesn't have solids in it like any matte covering, or even in watercolors, they use fillers, particles to make that matte, dry it out and make it look not glossy. Um, that obscures the color ever so slightly. So I got this because of the UVLS. I wanted to be able to protect the watercolors from light. Um, Problem with this is you use this, it doesn't have any filler, so it's nice and crystal clear, and it kind of brings an even sheen across the whole watercolor, but it's also glossy, and then you end up with a glare. So the matte, the way I've been using these is I use this to get the UVLS, and again, UVLS, this is particulates. This is what protects it is a screen of particulates. It's again like using matte, so you're obscuring the color. You put enough layers of this on, and it'll turn into a milky mess. Um, so I do one of these because it's much more liquid, and it soaks into the paper better, wherever that's where, like with that spray fixative. If I work it with a brush, it'll pull that fixative off, and all of a sudden I'm spreading my watercolors around. So you have to be expeditious, efficient, whatever, with your brushing onto the varnish, because if you keep doing it and working it, it will pull the watercolor through that fixative. The fixative just gives you initial protection against peeling up that watercolor. Um, this didn't. I didn't want this to become a tutorial about all these other crap that isn't painting with these, but whatever. I'll name it something appropriate. Oh yeah, so spray fixative outside, and then I come in and I put this on as the first layer, because it soaks in, it really unifies the surface, and then I put this over the top of this to uh, knock the sheen down. And this has some filling. It's thick enough that it really evens out. I don't know if I have anything handy that I've varnished. I'm not going to get in there again because that was almost disastrous. Uh, I'll varnish this when I'm done, and you'll see it. Um, it makes the sheen so even, and it, like on cold press paper, it flattens it out, so you don't get distracted by the texture of the paper when the light's hitting it from a different angle. Uh, yeah, so I love the varnish, and when you look at it, it looks like it's been printed by a printer on like a semi-gloss paper, or even like a satin paper or something. Really neat looking. Um, can't use varnish if you want to go into like a juried show and become a member of whatever particular watercolor society is the flavor of awesome that day. I'm not really interested in those kind of things. Uh, Having a bunch of acronyms after my name is not something that I am infatuated with. Uh, so I varnish my stuff, gives it better protection. Watercolor is supposed to be like a matte finish to begin with. Some watercolors leave a little bit of a glare, or a buildup of binder, like Da Vinci for me does that a lot. If I put it on too thick in a place, it dries and it'll have a little bit of a glare to that particular portion. The varnish is the unifier of that. It just makes it all look like the same sheen, and it makes the colors pop too. A lot of watercolors will kind of lighten, most of them actually, all of them. They lighten as they dry, and this sort of helps that color pop come back. Um, so that's dry. You get the idea of the wax resists. You can paint all the way over it. You know what? Let's just do a square and do that. I got sort of distracted there by, I want to make this look perfect. Instead of it being a demonstration of the functionality of the wax resist, it just became this is me painting something cool, which that happens a lot, even if it's not cool. All right, we'll use something crazy staining. This is PY or PR 254, like Puro Red, so it's a nasty color for staining and soaking in, and it's a beautiful color. It's a beautiful red, but so you can see a little bit of that box there. Now, while the paint's still wet, I can just dab it off and get that box back mostly. All right, I wiped off some of the colored pencil there, but this is an extreme example. But I wouldn't clearly have been able to save that square had I not put the wax resist on there first. Um, it's not like a crayon or a piece of candle or something. When you put that on there, that is a big buildup of wax. This is a nice thin sheen of very hard wax that does the job. I mean, if I just want to, if I just want to preserve a couple of blades of grass or a tree limb or something, it works great for that. You can see how when I went over that, I didn't belabor it, um, and you can pull it off. You can let it dry and then wet it and pull it, and it'll leave the color on behind it. And even when it's wet, it it leaves that wax resist. So these are great pencils. There's other colored pencil companies have colorless blenders. I know Prismacolor has one. The Blick brand colored pencils has a good one. It's a little abrasive, but it works well for this. But the Caran d'Ache is cool because there's no wood. This is one solid piece of wax, so you get a lot more value. I think there's too much crap on my desk, is what I think. Um, I think I paid $6 or something for these, and they last for bloody ever. Even if you use them as a colorless blender, these last a long time because they are full. There's no there's no wood in there at all. This is just one big stick, and it's lacquered or something on the outside. It's got some sort of a film on the outside, so it doesn't get gooey in your hands or anything like a wax would. Okay, so back to our sailboat. I put that stuff on there to kind of preserve it a little. Uh, all right, so let's get this done. So I'm gonna wet this guy, not this guy, around the sailboat. You really don't have to worry too much about getting on the mountains, but I don't want to completely saturate them since I'm going to do those as a different color. And I still want kind of a hard line there. Now you can see how, as a printmaking paper, if I had put this much water on a piece of watercolor paper, it would be just buckling up like crazy. And this just stays dimensionally stable. It's really fun paper to work with. Let's use their weird cobalt, which is just ultramarine blue that they mixed a bunch of white with. You can see how chalky and dingy that color is. Um, Not a huge deal. I don't mind chalky and dingy. A lot of times that's what the sky really is, and using a high chroma I don't know, it's probably should leave some clouds, like a phthalo blue or something. It ends up looking a little bit fake. Let's use the fancy rolled up paper towel cloud technique. You just roll a little piece of paper towel, kitchen towel for you Europeans, or kitchen roll. I don't remember what you call it. It's bog roll. So pulled some cloud out of there. They don't have a raw sienna, so I kind of tend to make my own out of yellow ochre and burnt sienna, or even a little bit of maroon in there. That's a really strong color. Now, normally I would reserve this space over here for doing what I'm doing exactly right now. It's just I used 4 colors in this painting, and this is how I mixed them. Burnt sienna is strong. All right, so get some of that off my brush. This is a squirrel brush, so it just holds a ton of paint, so I don't really need that. This is a little on the red side, but I want to add some reflection coming off of this uh, the earth over here. That is extremely. My brush needs to get rid of some of its paint. Let's soften up some of those edges a little. I'm just bringing that a glaze of that raw sienna mix that I made across the lower part of the sky, just warming it up a little bit. And leaving the white of the clouds. And you can add some, if you want to add a little thundercloud weight to the bottom of these clouds, you can do that with a darker version of the sky, or a Payne's gray kind of a thing. That gives the clouds some weight. Looks like they're about to dump some water. And this is a good time to use that color. Paint in my little hill over there in the distance. I'm gonna leave some white holidays here just to break up the monotony, and maybe put in a couple of really tiny buildings. Make it over there. All right, so at this point I'm going to dry this paper just because I want to put some other colors on. I don't want them to bleed through the line. Paper is buckling a little because I didn't dry it quite all the way, but I got that part dry. That's what I'm concerned about. Oh, we're going to contaminate that a little bit. Paint in some of the ocean with most of the ocean with a darker version of the sky color. Get around the boat. Oops, I didn't leave enough for some reflection. Get that out of there. Now you could be using that wax resist pencil, to save out some wave shapes, some chop top or something. I'm just going to try to leave some white in here to do that for this initial wash. And there's always white paint afterwards too. Oh, I need some sail reflection there. Kind of straighten out the lines of my sail. I did. I painted over my mast. Well, I'm not that worried about it. That's why they make white paint. Well, that's not why they make white paint, but that's why I'm going to use it. Draw a little of that color out of there. I hadn't really placed a light source yet. Yeah, we can put that in a minute. I'm thinking about shadows of the boat. I'm going to dry this. And then we can fill in the details that our initial wash has done. One thing to remember when you're hair drying things, you lose some granulation, because granulation is what happens over time as the water sits on the paper. The pigment has time to settle out and lay in the lows, and when you hair dry it, it just dries it so fast everything kind of sticks where it is, um, which is a good thing sometimes. I don't like a lot of granulation, especially with ACEO size stuff. A lot of granulation kind of tends to look weird because it's so big. Um, yeah, it doesn't look right. It looks better at larger scale stuff. So, all right. Now I do have the wax resist over this. I am going to try. This is not something I've tried before. I'm going to try to erase it. Remember, because I wanted to put some color in that sail, and I'm wondering if I can erase this wax off of here. This is a magic rub, so it's got some abrasion in it. You got to be careful not to wreck the printmaking paper. I got the most of the shape there. I'm going to take it off the boat too, and maybe get rid of some of that purple paint or purple pencil. I think we're going to have the light coming from maybe this side as far as local shadows, and I don't think that's a thing, local shadow. I'm thinking local color and cast shadow and whatever. All right, so the way that sail is shaped, billowing. See, if I wanted to put a straight line around the bottom of that sail, I would curve it because the bottom of the sail is pooching out kind of this direction. So I would try to follow that contour, but I don't have to because a lot of times these color swaths on a sail are big triangles, um, going from one side to the other, or swoops or swipes, and it's just random stuff. Which is what I'm going to do with that. So let's see how that eraser did. I already got that wet down. I'll use some of this stuff. This is their PR254 Pyrrole Red. Beautiful bright red. Great for high chroma stuff like what I'm doing right here. Yeah, you know what? That looks like that wax resist erased right off there, that's really nice to know because, um, yeah, you can use it to get the initial wash done and then erase it off and just treat well, like you would a masking fluid, I guess. But this is cooler than masking fluid because I don't have a gooey, gummy glue brush laying around. Hmm. After erasing, that color line is feathering a little bit, so the eraser might have roughed up the piece of this paper. I don't think that would happen so much on watercolor paper that's extremely sized. I don't even hear me when I'm running the hairdryer. This is supposed to be an expensive noise canceling microphone. I haven't tested whether or not it actually works with the hairdryer running. I know when the hairdryer is running and I look at the little green equalizer line there that moves up and down as I talk, uh, the green line is gone. It's like it's not picking up the hairdryer by itself. But when I start talking, I don't know if the hairdryer like peeks in there and clobbers my voice, but we'll see. Unscripted learning. I don't remember which color this is. Their PY. Is there 154? What did they use? Yeah. Oh, okay. PY 154 and PO 62. So it's their ACEO yellow medium, but they're using Benzie yellow and I think that's a Benzie orange too. PO 62. So we're gonna leave that just like that, and I'm gonna dry it so the colors don't sit there long enough on each other that they get an orange line kind of fuzzied between them. I want those to be fairly crisp lines. All right, that's good enough. Okay, so we were successfully able to erase the wax resist, which is really neat. I'm happy that's a working thing. I'm gonna use some dark color. Gonna add some Maybe I'm going to do that. I'm adding the mast in, like the shadow part of the mast. And I'm going to shade the, let's see here, we're going to get, it's a kind of a translucent, the sail is translucent, so if it's billowed out this way and the sun's coming from this direction, you would get cast shadow, or I guess, I don't know what you call it, surface shadow on the outside of the canvas, or mylar, or whatever they use for sails. Um, but the sunshine would be striking it from the inside, which would light it up a little bit. I'm probably overthinking this. I'm just gonna fake it and add some shadow to the surface of the outside of the sail. Ooh, I reactivated that yellow. That's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, but the yellow's kind of working with the purple of the colored pencil to neutralize that. No, that's really yellow still. All right, we're gonna get rid of some of that. Re-shade it with some darker color down the bottom, and I'm gonna sweep across that and that. And soften that quite a bit. It's nice when I'm filming, I get the camera straight on, I can look up at my screen and get a different perspective on what I'm painting than looking down at it from up here. Kind of one of the fun aspects of filming your work. All right, and so that's built up from the bottom, so that's going to have a little bit of shadow on the poochy part. All right, we're going to shade this side of the boat, and we're going to add some cast shadow on the water. I don't know if you can see what I'm using. This is just a blue mix. There's some blue and some brown in it, kind of an indigo, some puddle of whatever I had up there. Coming back through, I'll adjust this later, but just darkening the water in areas, leaving some highlights. It's kind of a big one there, but getting the reflection of the boat. And we're gonna get some dark color, and if I remember right, just a lot of numbers, or sometimes numbers and letters. We're gonna just put some obscure little writing or something on here. And that, and we're gonna define the boat a little more. We're gonna play like there's a cabin on there, and maybe some rails. I'm kind of holding my breath when I get real fiddly like that. So I added a red stripe to the side of the boat, kind of warbled it in on the water reflection. That's really small. I probably can't see a lot of what I'm doing, but you'll see it later in when I do the final image at the end, like a little recap or whatever. I'm trying to kind of dry brush this a little bit to, especially in the background, to add um, just little white caps, or at least infer some, sparkle in the water. That sort of activity, like a dry brush, is a little difficult on this paper because this paper doesn't have the same texture as like a cold press. There's not lumps on it like what you find in a cold press paper. So you kind of gotta invent the texture yourself. Getting up a little closer, I like to cop out and just kind of darken this corner. That's the way the focal point to me would be right here in this. So I'm just going to darken this over here so it doesn't draw your eye with a bunch of sparkles and things. I'm going to try to run some thin dark lines through the reflection on the water just to break it up a little bit. I'm going to try to run thin rigging line. That's enough. Stop messing with it. You'll see in a lot of people's paintings, same thing, is just a way to add life is put little birds in the sky. I like seascapes, or at least I like doing birds on seascapes because there's always tons and tons of birds. And this is fairly close to shore, so they could be out here playing with this boat too. Here, we'll put one here. A little larger. And we're gonna fancy him up. Ooh, just made a huge white, but we're gonna make him a little bit of white on there. Do I need white anywhere else? Here, I'll go this way with some white. To denote the stitching, or I guess seams on the canvas. Again, I don't know that much about sailboats, but I don't want this to just look like a big tube stuck to the top of the boat. And here we're gonna add some interest. We'll put the mast back in, give the cabin of the boat maybe a little roof on there, and then I'm gonna quit playing with it. This is a good example. You see how that watercolor, when I put that dark in the corner, it just sort of faded out when it dried out. I got rid of that one white. This is a fairly calm day, which doesn't make sense because the boat is, clearly heaved over a little bit with the movement and speed. Way to go, landlubber. All right, I'm really probably starting to fiddle this too much. Losing energy by adding detail. All right, I'll be done. I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out back there. I think I'm going to add some. Ooh, that's awful dark. Just add some random shadows. Since the light's coming from this direction, we're gonna shade the leeward side of the thing. I don't know if that's how you use leeward or whatever that word is, but it sounded fun. All right, and in the background, back here, we're gonna put a couple of boathouses and Some other things, a better color, or another color, I guess. It's something back there to denote that that's not just a dead shoreline there. We'll put something red back here. This building right here is going to be red. Kind of tying in with the red of the boat, sort of unifies the picture. And maybe something interestingly green. I like that green, and I want to put a, let's see, their lemon yellow is pretty opaque. So I can use that aspect of it. Wow, that's a green. That is a green yellow. Anyway, we're going to mix that with some white. I want a little more opacity in there. So the guy running this boat, he's got a yellow jacket on. And we're going to put just the tiniest little head on this guy. Stop messing. All right, he does need some blue jeans. Or blue shorts, or whatever particular Sperry topsider outfit you're wearing. All right, now he needs a little... Oh, this feels futzy. Little shadow. Wow, my yellow is just disappearing into the... This brush is big for this. Not happy with his coat. It's not sticking out enough. Then we're going to orange it up. There we go. Now you can kind of see him on there. It's interesting working with ACEOs. It's like it just takes a particular organization of a couple of dots to make things, and you screw those dots up, and it just looks ridiculous, like a bobblehead driving a boat. All right. There's a lot of stark white on this shoreline over here. I think I'm gonna tone that down some with just some shadow. I want to darken that shoreline at the base of the hills. I don't want to overdo it, but yeah, that's too dark. Now I'll soften those guys that I just put on there. I'm going to run this into soften that edge along the shoreline. Well, I'm playing back because there's really no detail back there. You can tell there's something going on. Yeah. I got kind of a weird splotch right there. We're gonna blend that into more splotches or a different shaped splotch. A lot of what I'm doing right now, I could probably just leave it alone. Nobody would know the difference, but if I don't do a little bit of OCD futzing, I don't sleep as well. So this is a good opportunity for me to dry this. Put my signature on it, and we're going to call it done. been toying with the idea of, at least on my ACOs, only signing on the back, but kind of the original idea of the ACO was for artists to trade cards back and forth, and I think the signature is sort of an important part of that. So you can look at your card and see who the artist was. And the problem with it is getting a signature in scale is extremely difficult. So it ends up feeling a little narcissistic, like look how big my signature is on my painting. Um, yeah, that was just a couple of random thoughts that every time I sign my name, I kind of have these thoughts. Are people going to think I'm, stuck on myself because of how big my signature is? And most of the time, it's just like that's as small as I can make it with a paintbrush and still be legible, or mostly legible, recognizable. I guess would be a better thing. I'm going to wipe that. I've completely contaminated my white paint with that red, and get that most of that off of there for later. Nice thing about doing this ACEO plus thing or whatever I'm doing, I can, to be able to practice my lines. Oh, that's kind of a weird pink color. Nothing worse than getting to this stage in the painting and then botching the signature. Not breathing. Yeah. All right. And in the past, I've gotten to this point, and I get so fixated on making sure the letters are right that I misspell my own name sometimes, and it's just what. All right. So before I cut this out is when I varnish it. I like to varnish, and that way I'm not when I'm painting and I've got the cut edge. The paint gets down on my base. It just kind of gets everywhere. It goes from front to back. Whereas here, before I write my little demographic stuff on the back, um, I can get this varnished on the front and make sure it's sitting well. Uh, and then I flip it over and in graphite and pencil write my whatever I want to write on the back, and then kind of knock the dust off of that and dab it a little bit, and then I'll varnish that too, so it can't be erased. Somebody can't um, easily erase my name and put their name on it or something. It's just like a protective, um, almost a built-in provenance or certificate of authenticity on the painting itself, rather than printing out a picture of the painting on my printer and calling that a certificate of authenticity, which to me is a little silly. Um, that certificate of authenticity that you see with most things. I mean, I could duplicate anything that anybody does really easy, and it's not super authentic, is it? So, all right, I'm going to pause this real quick, and I'm going to go outside and throw a quick coat of fixative on this, and be back, and I'll show you how I varnish. All right, I got it sprayed outside. It's still wet. Um, I brought it in. It's still smelly, but not as bad as if you spray it in here. Um, I run a hairdryer on it, dry it down. Um, yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to get there's a sheen on it. I use the matte fixative on that one. There's a sheen over the places where there's paint is thicker. Um, it all dries down to a flat finish or a regular finish, but you can see where it's protecting the thicker paint from being washed away with the varnish. I gotta move the toothpaste. I mean, yeah, I really should let this dry outside or something. It's not good to have this thing in the studio with me. Right. Oh, the other nice thing about varnish too, especially with watercolor paper, is the layer of polymer lays over the top. At first, it expands the paper and it bows up, and then when it dries, it comes back down. And the reason I do the backside as well is the backside does the same thing. It'll bow and then shrink down. And if you don't do both sides, it'll shrink to the point where it goes the other direction. It becomes concave. Uh, the varnish on both sides dries and tightens down, and it re-normalizes the paper to where it gets rid of a lot of your warps and buckles and things. Um, and get rid of this. So that's another reason I like to varnish. And this, I mean, this looks pretty good. There is some glare where I've got thicker paint and that sort of thing. Um, but the varnish just it gets rid of all that, gives it a nice sheen, looks very professional, and it protects it from fingerprints. You know, people, it's like a baseball card. People are going to handle it. Where you wouldn't, like, if you hang something on the wall, people aren't going to go up there and start, you know, pinching it and touching it. So it gives this, you know, portable stuff like this a little more of a protective finish. So my first, this is gloss, so it doesn't have as much sediment in it as like the matte does, but it still has the UVLS protectant in there. So I'm shaking that up to get it off the bottom. And this just this crappy old, well, it's not crappy, is it? It's an old Chinese nylon brush that I've had for 10 years and have just abused it so much, and it just keeps going and going. This is kind of my go-to varnish brush for my ACEO work. So like I said before, get it on there, get it done, don't overwork it. Get this first coat on there and make sure, you know, make sure it's not got some puddles or globs or anything on it. But that first coat helps protect over the next coats. Now the next coat you can put on thicker, work it a little more, but on the coat that's going over the top of the fixative, you need to get it on there and be done. Um, because it will, and I'm not worried about cleaning up my brush. I'm going to use polymer varnish on it again in a second anyways. But then I, you know, hair dryer, knock it down real fast, dry it out. Remember, that's a gloss, just to help seal it. That's actually, that one is a nice one to spray, kind of a little more and spray through my airbrush, um, without having to go to that toxic spray can fixative that always stinks so much. You can spray that stuff at the water base, and it doesn't stink, but it's a lot of setup. Like I would to do it on a regular basis, I would complete like 10 paintings or something, and then it makes it worth getting all the equipment out and cleaning it and putting it away. So I'm kind of, you know, just cheating, doing it one at a time with the spray can of fixative. But one of those spray cans will do well over 100 of these little paintings. All right, so that's got the fixative on it, and then the first layer of the golden varnish. Now I'm going to put the thicker layer of the Jo Sonja matte water-based poly. Get rid of the little boogers that build up on the lid there. Now I'm going to wipe this brush to get the gloss, you know, the excess gloss polymer, but there's not enough in there now to make this matte. Ooh, that's a lot. Okay, so again, another nice reason to leave to work with this larger. I got to keep working when I talk so I don't reactivate the layer underneath. But to have this nice big piece of paper, I can use up the excess that I just poured on there. I did not mean to put that thick of a coat on. I don't like doing that because then you got to work it extra. I'm leaning my head off to the side so I can look at the reflection of the light to make sure I'm not leaving a bunch of big mountains of of varnish on there. And the brush marks, they level out. This is another thing you have to be aware of when you're hair drying stuff. When you put a finish on like that, like a self-leveling gloss or something, it needs time to flow and shrink into a flat surface. So if I hit this immediately with a hair dryer, I am going to be drying brush strokes in there. Uh, Now this stuff shrinks so much when it dries that it kind of just goes away. But it's just something to be aware of, especially if you work on like hot press or something that doesn't have a texture to it to begin with. So I usually leave that brush loaded up with this matte varnish and I dry it once, and then I take the brush with the excess that's left in it, and I'll put one more coat over the top and dry that. Doesn't hurt anything to add several coats of this. It just gives it that much more mechanical protection from, scratches and splashes of things. And you can see it in your hair drying. You can watch the wet dry down, and then it goes matte over the whole thing. It looks amazing. It looks like a print ad or something, but without the gloss that you would get in like a magazine or something. So that's the layer of fixative, the golden polymer varnish, the gloss with the UV protection, and then the Joe Sonia matte varnish over the top of that, and then I'm just going to use up the excess of what's in my brush to go with top, because now I've got enough layers of varnish on there that I can work the brush in a little harder, to get the excess out of it. I'm not wasting material. I'm adding a little more protection to the painting itself. One thing I have noticed, even when I'm careful um, about not doing too many brush strokes, is it will still dissolve a little bit of the watercolor here and there, and then as you work it, it sort of turns it into a glaze, which is kind of cool. Like some of the red from the sail got into that, while in the purple, that weird purple pencil that I use, it got into the white of the sail, and it sort of unified the color of the white across. So it's not just stark white. It unifies the painting. So this is, I got nice reds and pinks in here. I got reds and pinks in the shoreline over there, the buildings and things. Uh, and my signature, I've got that little. It's kind of a paint color there too. You can't really see it too well, but it's there. The other nice thing about, or another nice thing, not the other nice thing about the varnish is that I can now, once this is dried, I can now make an acrylic glaze, and I've done that on a few paintings just recently. Um, like a peach color acrylic, using like a scarlet and maybe a little bit of yellow or something in there to make a nice peach glaze to warm up the painting. And you can paint that all across there. And I mix it with this stuff too. Um, Basically, it's tinting this varnish, and you can do a nice glaze and get all of a sudden a warm, like like at sunset, when the whole world kind of goes orange, or like a peach tint to everything. Um, you know what? I'll just do that now. Why not? We're already over time. Well, I don't know. We're not over time. I didn't really uh, a certain amount of time. So for the record, here is, see if that camera will focus, if I can tilt it correctly. This camera is a Logitech C920, which is usually a great camera. Do I have the autofocus turned off, maybe? Could be that I'm only focusing down low. 1 second, I will pull this up because it would be nice to have that. Ah, I got the autofocus turned off. How much time have I wasted on trying to get that to work? All right, so here's the picture. Come on, man. Oh, autofocus, why are you doing me dirty? I'm using OBS for my initial video recording. There, I got some focus on it. So that's the painting right now, with just the varnishes. I will, and most of the time I cut this out and sell it on eBay at this point. But we're gonna do a quick. No, we just use this cheap acrylic. We're going to do a quick glaze over this so you can see what I'm talking about with the, ouch, with the acrylic glaze. That's way too, I don't need that much paint, but it's really. it's hard to only get a little bit of paint out of these tubes for the this size of a little project that I'm working on. Um, and I did clean that. All right, I cleaned it. Nice. Wish I hadn't spent time cleaning the brush. I knew I was going to do this. All right, so now I've got those two little blobs of paint. This is just the back of it, like sour cream containers or cottage cheese. This is a Fritos bean dip. These make great little temporary palettes because they wipe off really easy, um, and they're kind of it's kind of a textured plastic on the back, so it stuff doesn't beat up so much on it. So I'm just pulling a little bit of that red into this puddle of varnish. I'll pull a little bit of this yellow into this puddle of varnish and get a nice peachy, orangey sunshine at sunset color. Get lots of, you don't want to, this is a pretty aggressive color. I mean, you can thin it or you can wipe it off after it's on the paper. So I'm going to go with that. Um, put it over here, see how orange it is. Oh, how colored it is. That's actually, that's a lot of red in there. All right. So that was, you saw the painting where it is. I could stop there and it'd be wonderful. This may be a mistake. We'll see. What I'm doing is just doing an acrylic glaze over the top of the whole thing, and it gives it kind of a old-timey photograph feel. Um, see, I knew that was going to be awfully orange, but it's not awful. I could wipe it. The other thing you can do is, clean your brush a little bit and then dry brush some of that off of there. But the nice thing about doing this, like if you try to do, well, either a watercolor glaze or even an acrylic glaze over naked watercolor, you're going to reactivate all that watercolor paint and just pull it off of there or smoosh it around. You're going to lose your detail. Uh, by doing the varnish first to give it a protectant and then doing the glaze afterwards with the acrylic, yes, it's not a traditional watercolor and that's now mixed media, but it looks cool. Oh, there's a hair. I got a hair in my sky. I don't know what kind of hair that was, but it was dinky. Dinky hairs are the worst. All right, so now I've dry brushed that off. I'm happy with that. The glaze sort of unifies the whole thing. And we've seen a lot of videos of people saying that, this is how you can liven a dead watercolor. Like a lot of times you'll have a watercolor painting that you do, and it turns to mud. The colors get separate. It just, you know what I'm talking about. It gets splotchy and weird. Um, I'm cleaning my brush off into a couple of pieces of paper towel. It may seem like I use a lot of paper towels in my channel here. All these are recycled from the kitchen. Um, I don't like using kitchen towels, like actual towels, like terry cloth bar towels or something when I'm cooking because it's not sanitary. You're moving, bacteria from one place to the other. So we use paper towels, but I do recycle them. Um, at least the clean ones. You wash your hands in the sink and use paper towel to clean up with. And I save those and dry them out and rip them in half, and they become my little blotting pad over here. And like there, I clean my brush out in that one, and then I use the wet part of that to clean my little lid out. This is ready to go for next time. Coffee's kicking in. I'm talking like a machine gun. All right. Okay, so that glaze is almost dry. Yeah, there are some brush marks in the glaze, but I'm not that worried about it. That's a nice hard finish now. It's on there. The watercolor looks really cool. You get the watercolor effect, but now you've got the finish or um, the film of a polymer, acrylic polymer. Because it's hard to get this sort of an effect with just using acrylics unless you thin them out real thin into a wash. And the problem with doing that, unless you use an expensive like a flow medium like this kind of guy, um, which is glossy in high concentration. If you just use water, you're going to break down your acrylic to where it's doesn't stick as well. The polymer is what binds the acrylic together and what makes it a tough finish. So I'm gonna go back up here with this. Let's see if I can get some. There's a little bit of sheen. The matte has a little bit of a sheen, but it's kind of a unifying. I would call it eggshell. Oh, there I can get some. You get a little reflection, but it's not distracting when you put it over on a wall or something. It's you're not getting any glare at all like you would with gloss, even on heavily textured paper. So I'm gonna try to go straight up with this and get the autofocus working. So see that peach glaze now. The whites aren't as stark, the darks aren't as dark, and you get a it's just a nice unifying wash over it, and it softens it into a it's not a sepia, it's not even really a sanguine. It just makes it look like an old photograph that has yellowed a little bit over age. I love that effect. Um, so now what I'm going to do is stab myself in the thumb with a pencil. I'm looking at this, the back of this in light, and I'm just putting some quick tick marks around where the ACEO borders are. So now I can write my demographics in and not end up over here where it's going to get cut off. And we're going to call this sunset sail, even though I probably could have called it evening sail or something. It's not really a sunset picture. Well, there's some peach in there now. And someday I'll do a video on what Slick Rooster Studio means. We are in Azle, Texas. Queuing. And today's date is 04/23/2022. And this is watercolor on Coventry rag. 290 GSM, I think is what it is. And I used a polymer varnish. I'm just going to call it poly varnish. And acrylic glaze. What did I do there? Acrylic glaze. You know what? I'm going to erase that. That's just got sideways quick. I used to be real careful about how I scribble stuff on here, how it all needs to line up. I used to draw guidelines, and I don't do that anymore. Like when I make a mistake and erase it, I don't care that it's erased all that much. To me, that just sort of humanizes these pieces. Like, wow, that guy really did paint this, and 100 years from now, they're gonna look at this and say, wow, look, that's his real writing. And like the things that we would think of if we were able to get a hold of the actual Da Vinci's notebook or something and see his scribbles and sketches and mistakes. I love his notebook because the things that I saw, you see in there, it really humanizes him. He's not perfect. Um, he does some really screwy crap in his notebook. Or his the Da Vinci's notebook, is that the what's it called? I think so. Anyways, it's Da Vinci's thing, and you look at it, and man, he was ignorant about a lot of stuff. There's all those old guys that we put on these pedestals as masters, and but then you see them talk about math or astronomy, and they're just like, the world was flat, or the world is flat, and I know it to be a fact. What? Shut up! It's not. Stop being so. They gathered a lot of clout, being amazing artists, and so people respected him a lot. And then they would say some really ignorant crap, and people just like, well, he's smart, so it must be true. Yeah, it's we get a lot of that today, actually. Some of the especially it was really magnified in the pandemic, the split between vaxxers and non-vaxxers, and is it a real thing, and I won't comply, and I just the ignorance. Somebody would say something like, "Oh, it's all a plot. The vaccine is a way to control. The government's trying to control you." And first of all, our government is not that clever, and second of all, that is an insane thing to say. But somebody who has clout in another area says something ignorant, and the people who say, "I'm not a sheep, I don't comply," are being sheep by following this guy. Sorry, I'm getting political. I don't want to do that, but still, I will go on record as saying, yes, get vaccinated, be safe, stop spreading it to other people. You know, the anti-vaxxers are a problem for everybody else because they're the spreaders, and that to me is just absolutely unbelievable. All right, get off of that soapbox immediately. So you saw me there. I dusted the graphite off and kind of wiped it off on the paper towel. I'm just right in the really on my glasses. So there was still some liquid on that lid when I smashed that back down, and it got all over me. All right, that was a fun tangent. Accidental tangent. Clean up some of the red paint off my thumb. Oh, that's red acrylic. That's not just wiping off. All right, so I'm just quickly getting this on there. Wow, that is an absorbent paper on that side. No, it's printmaking paper, so it's not sized, so it just sucks the liquid right in. Which is cool because now you know that, I mean, that varnish is really in there. And you can see when I do this, the graphite does liquefy, I guess. It softens and it will spread out in brush marks. I don't mind that. It makes it look authentic. Well, it doesn't make it look authentic, it makes it authentic. So glad I cleaned my brush again. Oh, I could have left I could have glazed that on the back, make it a nice orangey peach color all over the back. That would look nice. I've done that in the past, but I don't want to re-dirty my little lid palette just for that particular reason. But you know, it's a way to conserve material, not clean off all that glazy varnish into my paper towel. I could just clean it off onto the back of the painting, and it would look neat. All right, we're about this is about done kind of the painting. You see how how it's pooched up on the back because it got wet, really wet. Um, that printmaking paper really sucks in that water. It's designed to stay wet. Like when you wet it down and you put it on a table, you don't want it drying out immediately when you drop your block print or something on it. You want it to be kind of damp, because that pulls the ink off of your etching or block or whatever uh, into the paper. So they design it to stay wet longer, I guess is what I'm saying. Which is why you don't size it on the external. It's only internally sized to give it some structure. Most printmaking paper. And now it's got a little bit of a buckle to it, um, but only because this outside paper is constraining the areas that are really made wet. Once I cut along these borders, this particular portion will really level out and be nice and flat. So we're good. This is always the sketchy part, trying to cut it exactly perfect along that line. With the lights I have in the studio here, I've got three lights pointed at the ceiling for indirect lighting up at the top, and then down here I've got three LED ring lights pointed down, and I've got muslin cloth over those to diffuse the light. So I've got a lot of lights coming from a lot of different directions, but it's still like, for this particular portion, I get a dark shadow on the inside of this blade, so it's really hard to see that dark line that I'm trying to cut along. That could be my old eyes too. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea for me to start using my readers more. Come on. I bought these tailored or dressmaking shears specifically for this task because they're 8 inches long, 8 inches or something like that. I think they're 8 inches. Um, they're long, and using my, a different pair of scissors, a smaller pair of scissors, as you cut, you get here, and now I got to reset. Um, so in the interest of trying to make one nice smooth cut along my ACEO lines, I bought these, I don't know, 10 years ago, and they've been fantastic. They're Fisker's dressmaking shears, I think they're called. I got them at Michael's or AC Moore, one of the two of those. But once I get it set and going, as long as I don't freak out with my wrists or anything, I can do one cut, and it's a nice straight line across there. And I always feel afterwards to see if there's any divots, and I can shave if there's a bump or something. But that's good enough for me. That's good enough. I mean, a piece of watercolor paper pre-cut into the shape of a ACO, that wetting and drying and wetting and drying and buckling, it's going to be warbly on the edges anyways. So this is probably a little better than that. And I always darken my cut edges. You can use India ink. This is just a alcohol marker. Um, it just dresses the edges nicely. Makes it feel like a miniature version of like a museum grade canvas where you paint the black around the outside. I kind of like to do that with all of my acrylic and oil paintings that I do on canvases. Unless I'm just practicing, I use a canvas at least 1.5 inches offset so I can get a nice border around the backside. Even if it's going to be framed, it's nice to dress it up that way. So there we go. That is ACEO on Coventry Rag using Art Whale watercolors. 3 or 4 colors, whatever I used there. Varnished and then glazed with acrylic red and yellow paint into a nice peach glaze. Um, Off that goes on eBay and makes me a little more money to buy more art supplies. Oh, thanks for watching. If you're still here, yeah, that's amazing. Uh, this is one of those videos that I'll put it out there the way it is, and uh, I'm not going to edit it. A lot of people, like, it's so long, but it's just me painting and talking, and it's fun for me to watch later. It's fun for my fiance to watch and kind of see what I'm doing when I'm doing it. Uh, yeah, it's just for nothing. If nothing else, it's good for me to have as a slice of my own life to watch later. But if you enjoy watching it, hit the like button, subscribe button. I'd love to have you as part of the channel. Yeah, so I'm gonna put this away and I'm gonna do another one on a lot of my tips and tricks that I use. I kind of used a couple of them in this video, but I want to do a I want to do a video about how I do watercolor stuff. Some of the tricks that I use, I don't know that a lot of people use them, so might be helpful. If not, it's again a way to kind of track my own activities and how I spend my time in my studio. So thanks a lot for watching. Take care.